Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in for another episode for the Money Talks podcast. I am your host for today, Alessia, and I have the honor to be joined by an accomplished woman, an impact entrepreneur, and international project manager whose expertise spans government, international development, civil society, and business. She's also the published author of a new book called Being Other and serves as a board advisor and curator. Her work centers on the intersection of technology, sustainability, inclusion, and entrepreneurship, with a particular passion and focus on empowering women in their roles as leaders. I am so looking forward to discussing her insights today into female leadership and her commitment to building inclusive and sustainable communities. So please welcome Hanae BEZAD. Hanae, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Alicia, for this warm introduction and for having me today.
It's such a pleasure. So, Hanae, I would love to start from the beginning. And before we discuss all the impactful work that you're doing today, we'd love to hear your story and your background in your own words.
Absolutely. So I was born and raised in Morocco. I'm the third of a family of girls, which means I grew up as the youngest, but also I like to joke that I was the wisest. I was able to facilitate discussions and conversations, which sometimes I find I do now as a job, which is fun. I grew up in a family that was very much in tune with social work. Both my parents kind of engaged were socially engaged in the sense that my late father was a doctor. He studied many different specialties in medicine and brought a number in Morocco in terms of training people and advocating for people to have access to health advisors or medical doctors. And on my mom's end, she was quite the feminist. She is the first of her family to have studied in university, to have chosen her husband. She studied French literature and focused on the position of women in North African literature. And so when I read her writings when I was a teenager, I was really inspired and also questioning a number of things. And that sparked many conversations for us to analyze the Moroccan society, its layers of complexity and conservatism, but also streams of modernity and how it's trying to invent itself or reinvent itself also to move forward. And also, having grown up in this family that had, I could see both my parents do social work on their own, but also together. So I also had a little bit of a, let's say, power couple as a model, and even in hard times. So we experienced hardships, like many. One of my sisters was sick and she had skin diseases for a long time, but eventually she also had cancer at some point, and she battled a lymphoma when she was diagnosed when she was 23, and she passed away when she was 24, and I was 16 at the time. So obviously kind of got me acquainted with difficult aspects of life. So loss and illness, and also from there, a subsequent need to emerge on my own and to become really independent so I could forge my way forward on my own terms. And that got me really to, hold on to what I had in terms of education. I was very good at school, so eventually I received a scholarship for excellence from the French government. I was able to study in France, in the US, and start my career from there. A few years down the line, eventually my father passed away. So I was still quite young. I was 23. And so there was an additional kind of hit or moment where life gets upside down and you have to reinvent yourself. And so I think with those, and of course some other consequences, but that really got me to think, how do I keep up with the legacy of beautiful work that is meaningful, and also, from trauma can emerge a lot of beauty if you do the work. And so I think those, there are so many aspects of my work now, but I would say those were defining moments for me to decide to make sense of it all, and decide that all the time and energy that I have on this earth, I would like to spend on meaningful, impactful work that is rooted in those values that I was fortunate to be taught by my parents. And so with that, I studied, like I said, in France and the US. I started my career in France, and soon enough, I decided to return to Morocco to start my entrepreneurial ventures. That was 7 years ago. Since then, I developed a number of projects. I also worked as a policy advisor for African governments on startups and innovative ecosystems. I've been moving quite a lot. I'm quite the traveler. I've been traveling to about 56 countries to this day. Not yet to Saudi Arabia, but I'm looking forward to it. And I kind of realized with my journey that every time I was drawn to, let's say, women and communities of women that had an aspiration and that had, that wanted a little bit of a spark. And I started to act as a catalyst for their dreams through the work and programs that I was putting together, but also through conversations. And so I kind of realized this is very much aligned with my purpose. I love to see in general people that feel so aligned and so in tune with their own light, let's say. But in particular women, because women have, suffered a number of systemic issues, inequalities, and to this day, we question a lot feminine leadership, and it's much needed. To actually elevate it and honor it. So I like to have those conversations every time I can. And with this book being Other, the Beauty and Power of Being an Outsider, it's a little bit of a reflection on gender, culture, some of the things that I've experienced as a female founder, repatriate entrepreneur, but also in other positions in Africa, in Europe, in other places, and also many conversations with other female entrepreneurs from the African continent, from Latin America, from Asia, from minority groups, so-called minority groups in the global north, and kind of trying to connect the dots and see not just a display of difficulties, but actually what can we learn that is helpful for other people on their journey to full self-expression. And so that's what this book is about. I just, let's say, wrapped up a year worldwide book tour. I was in San Francisco last week, and I spent a few weeks in the US. So all the way from Washington, D.C. to Austin, Texas to San Francisco. And that was, the end of a tour that took me to 12 different countries to give 30 talks and engage with more than 1,000 people. I learned so much from it, and I can't wait to share more about it.
I have to say, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's very personal, but also on the other hand, it's so inspiring, and your journey, it's also very beautiful it's a story of power, and also to hear how you inherited all the characteristics and the traits that make you such an amazing individual that you are today, that you inherited it from your parents. The feminist side from your mother, also maybe this philanthropical side. So thank you so much for sharing that. Maybe we can talk a bit more about your book. Why did you decide to do this worldwide tour, so to say? What was...
Well, perhaps I can start with the intention behind the book first. So I was at a point of my career where I had made a number of decisions that were not easy decisions, as in, leaving a comfortable position that was so socially respected and so on, and where I started to build things, but deciding to do so because I felt like I was hitting walls again, and I was not in a place where I could actually fulfill the full vision that I had. So that was one. So I was in a little bit of a place of a transition, and then I thought, the last few years have been really intense, and I was never told it would be that intense. Yeah. I've always, done dual degrees and engaged in so many projects that were ambitious and demanding, but truly it felt like those few years of entrepreneurship were decades. And so I first wanted to unpack this. And also it was a time where, in addition to kind of self-analyzing and seeing where I'm at, where am I going with all I was hoping to achieve, kind of having also a reality check, it was a time where so much documentation and knowledge was now being shared around the specific experience of women of color in the workplace. And that was an understanding and a framework that was really helpful for me, because and then I started thinking, okay, so a lot of the things that I came across, the challenges that I came across, have nothing to do with me or my personality or the fact that I'm not quite the conformist person, but it has to do with deeply entrenched dynamics that are against the full fulfillment of individuals and of women in particular, and kind of trying to keep them small, and biases, and that results in very tangible consequences, not having access to funding, to support when you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to do good and you have ambitious, solid plans. And so I was at that place of needing to make sense. And so when I started working on the book, it was more of a research approach, and it was more of almost like a PhD material. And the book was meant to be called Integrity Lessons from the Beginning. And it had, like examples, but also an approach with a lot more structured interviews and so on and so forth. And until I met with my publishing house, who encouraged me to really speak with my own voice and take space. And I was quite, it was quite a journey to do that, and then I thought, as much as I was grateful to have received some exposure from the media as a female entrepreneur, it was not always actually helpful. And so I was really torn between, do I want to put myself out there and tell my story, or, how is that going to help? And so eventually I made the decision to go with this invitation. And it was a very powerful journey, because it really got me to revisit so many situations. I had so many notes already from years of documenting situations, but it got me to revisit that and really understand where I was at and coming to a place of peace. From that point, it gave me a lot of confidence that these messages needed to be shared, which is why, I don't shy away from actually telling my story, because I know sometimes in the business world, we're expected to say, this is my label, this is what I'm doing, these are my KPIs, this is what I've been able to achieve, but who's the human behind it? And I'm very interested in the human behind it, because I believe the business space has humans that need to become more human, because business is only an excuse to create more shared humanity. That's my perception, that's my vision. And so with that, of course, we can create structures, organizations, plans, missions. We can be very effective in that. That it doesn't mean, empathy is against efficiency. But it's more about what matters is the people behind it. What do they have inside of them? What have they been able to achieve in terms of understanding of the world? Because their worldview is going to be reflected in the way they work and what they do. And so with that in mind, I kind of got to the place where not only was it important that this book was published, but it was important for me to also bring it to places. So, of course, like I said, I'm a traveler and I love to travel. So for me, it was a natural step to say, okay, well, let me see how I can bring it to places and activate my networks. But also every time I was invited anyway for conferences on other topics, say COP, for instance, or Davos, then I would still hold space for that conversation to happen. And then I kind of realized it was needed. Many people needed that context, that safe space, that facilitation to open up to what they're experiencing, to make sense, to connect also the dots. 2024 is such a special year. It's a year of 70 elections where we just witnessed one that is very important, the US one, and we just got the results, which can be very unsettling for a lot of people that believe in progress and liberal values. And so where do we go from there? And it's also an important moment and step, because I think for many years and in many different contexts, not just Western democracies, but also in other countries that are aspiring democracies. I come from Morocco. We've been in democratic transition for many years now. We can be subject to some sort of manipulation based on elements of our identity by people that do not have at heart our best interests, and they play identity politics. And my message with this book is to say, we need to examine ourselves so much and make peace with so many things and do the inner work, so much so that we build that strength and resilience and empathy, so that we don't play identity politics in any way, be it in the political arena or social arena, but also in the workplace. But we also build on identity leadership. What makes me today as a social entrepreneur and an author is a lot of the things that were given to me in the context of where I grew up. I've noticed that it's been quite an evolution for me to reclaim those aspects of identity. When I started my career in France and in the US, I so believed in meritocracy that I wanted to erase everything that was part of me, because what I thought was that anyway, what mattered was the outcome, as in the quality of my papers, the quality of my presentation. But truly, the fact that I'm a woman and I'm from the global South and I'm Arab African and I'm young, all of these aspects of me came into play in the way I was perceived, in the way I was given legitimacy and credibility, or not. And so eventually, for a long time, I kind of wanted to dismiss that until I kind of made it my own. It is part of me. I experience the world as a woman, and so that gives me access to a number of things and a certain understanding of the world that is informed by my biology, by my sensitivity is also part of it. But that also means that I can see things that perhaps some men cannot see. Most of the men that I've interacted with in the past, while well-meaning, could not necessarily identify and see situations for what they were, of lack of safety for women, of injustice for minorities, and so on. So I kind of started to understand and develop this appreciation of, I have this approach and granular approach because I've been exposed to other realities. And I can hear that. And instead of hiding it, I'm actually going to make it a gift and a blessing to the world and share my voice. And so all of this came together in deciding to not just write the book and publish it, but also bring it to the world. And I must say, it's been a massive endeavor, to be organizing in this book tour, in addition to my client work, which sustains me actually. But it's something that I gladly did because I know it is part of my contribution to making the world a better place. And anytime I will have a chance, I will do so. And, as much as I have other work to do, and I'm also working on other creative projects, I published some poetry, which I self-edited and so on. But the message is the same, The more I do that, the more I say I'm myself, and I invite people to be themselves, which I think is a liberation.
Actually, I had so many questions prepared regarding your book, but you did cover most of it. Thank you so much for that. Maybe you can give us a quote for your book, or a visual, because I know that you have it there with you.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll share some of the last paragraphs in the book. If we care about people, planet, purpose, regenerative and circular business models, decentralization, equity, fluid identities, inclusive workplaces, sensitive and conscious leadership, then women of color are a fount of resources and wisdom to tap into for the benefit of the collective. Their experiences of life are not new to them. This being in life in terms of race and gender is what they've always known. And it's this very angle that has given them the much needed wisdom and perspective. To be who I am, an Arab and African woman, is a blessing that I hereby offer to the world. If we seek organizations that value human beings beyond productivity and efficiency, beyond numbers and figures, and prioritize meaning, senses, and holistic well-being over shareholder value and the bottom line, then women of color are the trailblazers. These remarkable women have navigated injustices, finding ways to heal and become caretakers of themselves and others while embodying a balanced approach to service, because they've chosen integrity. Choosing integrity has been for them, as it has been for me, a journey of patience and audacity. It entails self-discovery and acceptance, as well as discerning which battles to step back from and which ones to advance toward. It is about knowing which seats to claim and which tables to build. It is a journey of exponential expansion, and choosing integrity is and always will be just the beginning.
So beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And how do we access your book?
Yes, well, the book is available on all platforms. You can order it from Amazon. You can also go and speak with if you have a favorite independent bookstore, they can order it. They can be in touch with my publishing house, the Dreamwork Collective, which is a Dubai-based publishing house. And we can also discuss, if there's a community that you're part of, maybe an engagement for me to come and speak with you guys. So it's, everything is open. I'll be delighted to engage with anyone who wants to go further.
Great. And now I would like to go back to your journey as an entrepreneur. I would like to know what your main focus is right now. I know that you have a new project, an initiative that you're working on. It's an ecosystem and kind of an investor club along with this pre-acceleration program. Could you share a bit more on that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this question. So I'm working on launching Integritas, which is an ecosystem that is meant to support Black, Indigenous, and women of color founders in health, climate, and education. So we're focusing on founders that are from the global South, or global majority, as some people like to say, and minority groups in the global North. And the reason is because many of us in the founding team have experienced that firsthand. Some challenges and relating to other women that are in these contexts, and understanding that the challenges were common. It's lack of support, lack of funding. There's 1 to 2% of VC capital that goes to women founders in general, and it's even worse when it comes to women of color. And so we intend to support them on their leadership journey, so which is why we start with a creative leadership program on site in Morocco, a 1-week creative leadership retreat, followed by 10 weeks of pre-acceleration program. For the first cohort, we're focusing on climate solutions. We think it's urgent. It's also become clear in our many interviews over the summer that it's a key priority to focus on. But soon enough, we'll bring health and education, because this is also where we have expertise and a lot of experience ourselves and our networks. And then we invest in their solutions. So we are doing pre-seed, investing from 50 to 250K. So right now we're fundraising for it. We're also setting up an investor club. And the reason why we're doing so is because we've noticed that more and more people want to invest in startups. I mean, especially in the region. I come from Morocco, and angel investment was not so much of a thing 7 years ago. It is now, which is very good. But they need a context, and they need, and sometimes they need training. So we're putting together this investment club. It has people from zero experience but want to be business angels, to people that are in VC and family offices and so on. It's membership based. It's 10K that allows you to have not just access to the community, but also to thought leadership, to training, to retreats that we've designed that are set in contexts that are very expensive. Let's say the Atlas Mountains, Hawaii, places where you can really expand your vision when it comes to regenerative business practices, immerse there with local native business and cultural leaders, but also working with people that have had extraordinary path in terms of climate action and energy orchestration and so on. So we really want to take care of this community and nurture everyone so that we can foster mutually beneficial relationships and not just grow a beautiful cohort of entrepreneurs, but also grow the ecosystem around them to hold them in their path, and from there being able to definitely grow a movement. And we think it's really necessary at this point. A lot of the things that we've witnessed is that there's not enough support for women entrepreneurs in general, not enough in climate solutions. We are at a place now where we need entrepreneurs to step up, because governments are not doing their work as much as they should. And it's becoming urgent. I mean, again, latest election is a catastrophe for climate action. And so we're going to need to pull out a lot more resources for people that are actually doing things. And when it comes to ecosystem support, sometimes the, let's say, traditional copy-paste of Silicon Valley type of ecosystem support is not relevant or efficient, especially for female entrepreneurs. So we really want to focus on their leadership path and regenerative business practices and purpose-driven investment.
I see. And one thing that I always ask when I speak with social leaders and entrepreneurs like yourself and impactful ones, there are many challenges, because of course this goes beyond the traditional model that often focus only on financial returns. Mm-hmm. So, for example, taking this unique approach for not only focusing on the social impact, but also integrating technology. What are the challenges that you faced firsthand, mm-hmm. and how do you make sure that you navigate and thrive in both aspects, like the social and the financial?
Yes, it's a very relevant question. Thank you so much for that. So like I said, I've been a social entrepreneur for 7 years now. When I started, I was bold enough to just completely be passionate about my projects and not look so much into what's going to happen 18 months down the line. So I had 2 projects in my suitcase when I came back to Morocco. I launched my coding school and made sure that it becomes a lot more impact-driven than the original franchise. And I developed a project, Grassroots, was very experimental, and eventually both projects picked up. All the way through, I had little to no access to additional funding. I was just able to make sure that I would be able to pay myself, pay my people. It was very frustrating because there is funding that needs to be more available. But yeah, that was definitely a challenge. And to this day, I have to explain and repeat to people that when you're a social entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur. So you're also seeking a healthy bottom line, because that's how it works. Otherwise, you're not doing, you cannot pursue the work. And so it's a lot of education. So a lot of the work that I've been doing, in addition to making sure that my projects were successful, was evangelizing. And I continue doing just that, in order to unlock funding that is available. So one of the things that we're going to put into our approach in terms of Integritas is using a value life flow index that we're going to integrate in the due diligence that we do for investors, for them to consider investments in the startups that we bring them. And we're going to have to educate them on how it's relevant now to shift their perspective on, okay, what are the financials of this company? What is this ability? What are their ability to scale? To also take into account indicators that are in this value life index, which are integration of heritage, quality of relationship within and outside, and another of long-lasting impact measures. So there's a lot of education, and I think I made peace with the fact that we need to do that. And because I actually find it a lot more satisfactory to do this work rather than say, well, it's too complicated, I'd rather go mainstream and go back to traditional jobs. It's not my role. And once you just have to show up to it and continuously engage and build up that strength. I think a lot of people right now are concerned about where the world is heading, what kind of consciousness can we use to actually be able to move forward with optimism and with greater, brighter perspectives. And so there's a lot more, let's say, curiosity around what social entrepreneurship can bring. There's also a lot more models of success. So there are influential organizations, awards, conferences. I was in San Francisco and I met 1,500 people at SOCAP that I was emceeing. And so these people are impact investors. They know the investment space really well, but they have been able to push for the adoption of mechanisms and vehicles that are conducive to social impact and environmental impact. And so this is the sort of knowledge sharing that is important across the globe, so that we can create and recreate models that are more regenerative. We don't have to stick with the old-fashioned for-profit organization, philanthropy, and once I become extra rich, then I can do a little bit of good so I can feel great. Yeah. It doesn't have to be this way.
Thank you for that. And Hanae, I have to ask, because here at the MVS and the Money Talks podcast, we are very passionate about technology. And I've also seen that you actively participate in conversation about AI and technology.
Correct.
Could you share maybe how do you see it evolving
Absolutely.
with social good? How do you personally engage with it in your work?
Absolutely. So I'm a technologist at heart. I started my career as a digital strategy consultant, overseeing large project e-commerce platforms for large corporates in France and such. And then eventually I was trained as a developer. And that's why I decided to bring that training to people in Morocco, because I thought, this is the sort of skills that people will be happy to have to enter the workplace and also to develop their own projects. And so as much as I've been trained in Web 2, I actually stepped in the Web 3 space the last couple of years, mostly working with Lisbon-based startups that were bridging conservation organizations and biodiversity preservation with the Web 3 space. So using blockchain and the NFT space to actually fundraise for biodiversity preservation in an innovative fashion. In terms of AI, I use AI regularly. I'm involved in a number of projects. First of all, I'm a co-founder of a startup that is in its prototype mode, that is using AI to provide sexual and reproductive health guidance. So we've been able to develop the technology, and it's currently being tested in communities in South Africa. I'm also helping the Amrita Puri University in Kerala to put together a gender AI conference. So I'm giving the keynote. I'm also mentoring some of the students. In terms of our program Integritas, we have AI embedded into it. And it's not just a trend. It's truly something that we believe is unlocking possibilities. 20 years ago, for a company to reach $1 million revenue, research has shown that they needed at least 20 people, 20 recruits. Today, when you're using AI adequately, you need one. What am I saying with this? I definitely don't want to encourage us to not provide jobs. That's the opposite of what I've been pursuing over years, especially in the context of Africa or North Africa. I think technology needs to create opportunities. So we're not trying to optimize this. However, when it comes to the early stage of startups, and especially for female founders, a lot of them, without support, having to have many jobs at the same time to be able to launch a company, when they use AI adequately, they can bring themselves to a certain place where they can then recruit and then grow a team on the basis of healthy operations and supports. And so that is a very powerful shift in technology. And so I'm constantly on the lookout for the advancements in the space. I'm also very involved in conversations when it comes to ethical technology. I was a curator for a festival which I brought to Morocco in May this year, and we had many panels around ethical AI, AI that doesn't exploit the workforce in Africa, because a lot of the consolidation and refinement of the algorithm has been done on the shoulders of young people, poorly paid, if paid at all, in Nigeria and Kenya and in East Africa. So I've opened conversation with people that have set up unions to support the mental health of such workers and so on and so forth. So for me, it is important to act as someone that can share the knowledge and elevate such voices. So anytime I have a chance, when I'm invited to curate or convene or organize a gathering, I make sure that these voices are represented, because sometimes they're overlooked because they're not out there. So I wear those many hats when it comes to technology. I definitely believe in innovation and technology. I'm also passionate about technology in the airspace, and so looking forward to seeing the future advancements there. But I think when it comes to inclusive technology and ethical technology, it's important to voice a stance, and so that's what I'm up to.
Great, that's amazing. So unfortunately, we've come to the end. I don't know, time flew, like literally flew. I would like to give you one chance to maybe close this conversation by perhaps a final thought or a call of action, whatever you would like.
Perhaps a couple of calls to action. First of all, being other is very much a call to action. Being other is about being whole, being wholesome, being you. And I know it's sometimes uneasy, or sometimes it sounds so easy. It sounds very simple, but it's a journey that I engage everyone to be on, because with more authenticity, we can build so much more beauty. So that's one. The second call to action is to effectively support more women entrepreneurs and more women social entrepreneurs. We're at a time that feels very chaotic in the world. We need more people to stand up for peace, to stand up for climate, for the protection of the people, of culture, of minority groups, of women's rights. And so when you have a little bit of agency and power to engage in that work directly, and or to support other people in that work, please do so. It is important. That matters. You matter. And that is an accountability that we're going to be held to by future generations. So my second call to action is to show up with as much joy and optimism to support this work.
Okay, thank you so much for your messages, and thank you again for coming on the podcast. So thank you guys for tuning in, and see you next time.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Thank you, everyone.